I was wondering if you could first tell me about your upbringing in Germany, since you were a very notable Soviet spy, but you're not Russian. So I was wondering
That's
if you could
right.
explain the world that you came up in.
That's right. It had a lot to do with the fact that I was born 4 years after the end of World War II. So, particularly East Germany was very impoverished because when the Soviet troops moved in, what wasn't already destroyed during the end of the war, they took away as reparations. They even dismantled railroad tracks and stuff like that. And there was poverty to go around. You know, there was a lot of malnutrition in the cities. They didn't have enough food. Luckily for me, I grew up in the country, so there were always potatoes available. Yeah, and I have a picture of myself when I was about 11 years old. I was thin as a rail, and a friend of mine many years later told me that we were known as potato babies because we were malnourished. I I never experienced hunger, but again, I was developmentally behind, caught up. By the time I went to high school, the food was better. The other thing that really had an impact, there was the medic, the medical treatment that we got was fundamentally almost non-existent. I mean, there were no drugs available to deal with like the strep throat to minimize the effects of a flu or cold. We had to just live through it. And my God, that I remember still today that my doctor hurt me several times, really hard. One time he cauterized a wound at the bottom of my left foot, on the sole of my foot. It was a pretty deep wound. I had stepped into some glass, and he cauterized that wound without anesthesia. It was painful. It was all tough love, okay? And one thing that took me quite a while to realize and understand, the one thing that as a child, as a young child, you're looking for that from your parents particularly was emotional love. Hugging, kissing, affirming you. Uh, It was all tough love. It was like discipline. You perform and then you get rewards. And believe it or not, in my extended family, so there were two sets of grandparents, three sets of aunts and uncles, and my father and mother. In my entire youth, I never once heard the words "I love you" spoken when I could hear. I never saw my parents hug, kiss. And so I didn't get any hugs and kisses, and I didn't get any I love yous.
So,
And that
what was your concept of affection then?
I didn't have one. That's a good question. And that's a question I've never been asked. That made me think. I didn't know that existed. I just knew that in order to do well with my parents, I had to get good grades. They were both teachers. And my father was actually in middle school. He was the principal of the school that I attended. That put extra pressure on me. So I had to get good grades, which I managed. It was not a problem. And then I had to do chores. So I didn't know affection. I knew appreciation. I got some money. I got paid a couple of coins when I got the coal from that we used to burn to heat our place from the cellar, that kind of stuff. But it was all performance, reward, and a story.
It's a little hard to picture this world, since during World War II, Germany was a powerhouse. At least that was part of the perception they put out. They had movies, they had the massive architecture. So none of that was around during your upbringing.
No, simply whatever architecture may have been left over in the cities, and the big cities were, a lot of them were pretty much destroyed. There may have been, cities in the east, in the southeast. I think Munich may have been left alone for quite some time, but But in the East, Berlin was destroyed. Dresden, the most beautiful city that we had, was all ruins. And and I grew up in a village, and then in a small town, and the Soviet army just passed by there. So there wasn't a lot of destruction. The good news was, as a result, I I actually grew up in a nice apartment that was part of a school building that wasn't touched, and then in a half of a house in the country. So we also had a garden and a backyard, and so in many respects I was better off than the city dwellers. But it was still, at Christmas time, I usually got presents that I didn't like fresh underwear and maybe one toy. Right. So and this was normal because my friends were just as quote unquote well off as I was.
So relatively, you understood that you were kind of all equal.
Yeah, absolutely. All equal. There was nobody better off. Now, there and there were a couple of private businesses, but I didn't think they were better off either. So we had a butcher and we had a baker and we had somebody who repaired plumbing and stuff like that. There was no car mechanic because nobody owned a car.
Well, what did you guys do? Maybe this is the wrong word to use, but what did you guys do for fun? Or was there anything maybe that you actually remember fondly about your growing up?
Okay, you had to be inventive. Okay, before I received a soccer ball, soccer was the big thing to do because you can do it without, you just go find some grass, a lawn, and you kick the ball. Before I had a soccer ball, I don't know what we kicked, but I played hockey. So I took I cut off a crooked piece of wood, and then I found something that I could hit against the wall. Okay, and I played by myself. Um, Also, when I learned to read fluently in first grade, I started reading a lot, fairy tales, anything I could get my hands on. I also, because, let's say it was winter time or it was raining outside, you couldn't go next door. Your playmates were not readily available. So I played board games by myself. I had little teams that competed with each other. So this sort of prepared me for loneliness as a spy because, I knew that I could handle being pretty isolated because I was as a child, and that was not a big deal. Uh, so then when I got a ball, uh, we played soccer. I played against my brother who was 1 year younger than I, and his friend, and I had to bribe him to play against me because I was a lot taller and more athletic. But we made do. We made do.